story isn't just for views. It's a tough lesson about trust, boundaries, betrayals. We share it so you don't make the same mistakes.
His body hit the floor with a dull, wet thud right between the dessert carts. You could hear the air rush out of his lungs before the sound even registered. Travis folded in half, groaning like something inside him had snapped. Silverware clattered. A server gasped. A few people stood, too late to do anything, hands frozen halfway to their mouths. And my husband just stood over him, silent, chest rising, fists loose but ready, not even shaking. It happened in 1 second, one breath, one decision, but it rewrote everything. A minute earlier, I'd been smiling at a toast. I was still holding the champagne glass. I felt Travis's hand slide down my back like grease, resting where no one had invited it. And I didn't react, not with my words, not with my body. I stared at the floor, said nothing, moved not an inch, and my husband saw all of it. If you're still listening and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. I wish I could say I panicked, or that I pulled away, or that I laughed it off awkwardly. But none of that happened. I just froze. Not because I was scared, but because part of me didn't want to make waves. Travis was the one signing off on our next funding round. He was drunk, sure, but that was how he always acted. Smug, bold, protected. I told myself it was easier to ignore it, that this moment would pass, but it didn't. My husband didn't yell, didn't lunge. He just stood slowly, deliberately. And then, in a move so fast most people missed it, he slammed Travis against the wall with one arm and brought him down with a low, brutal shot that left the man gasping on the ground. The room didn't explode into chaos. It went dead quiet. A woman dropped her phone. One of the interns covered her mouth. My boss whispered something I couldn't hear. The head of HR just stared. Then he turned to me, only for a second. His eyes didn't accuse. They didn't beg. They just confirmed what he saw. What I didn't stop. What I allowed. He walked out without saying a single word. And I stood there, still holding the champagne glass, heart pounding in my ears, wondering how the hell I let that happen. Wondering if I'd just watched my husband walk out of our marriage for good. I sat in the back of the car they called for Travis, just staring out the tinted window like a passenger in someone else's life. HR ushered him out the side entrance, holding an ice pack against his ribs. They didn't ask me to come with him. They didn't ask me anything, and the CEO muttered something about cleaning this up quietly, but no one looked me in the eye. I kept glancing at the door my husband had walked through. Like if I stared hard enough, maybe it would open again. It didn't. Instead, the silence swelled. Not angry, not loud, just thick with everything unsaid. Back at the house that night, his shoes were gone from the entry rack. One drawer in the bathroom hung open, half empty. The key hook beside the fridge was bare. I stood there holding my phone, watching the digital clock blink 11:42 p.m., then 11:43, trying to decide how to say something that wouldn't sound like a lie. Eventually I typed, "Please come home. It wasn't what you think." Nothing came back. I waited, 15 minutes, then an hour. Then I checked the driveway again, like some part of me expected him to appear out of shadow. I walked through each room, lights off, trying to feel the shape of what just happened. The house was still physically intact, but it felt wrong, like someone had vacuumed out the trust. The bed felt bigger that night and colder. I didn't cry, not yet. It was too soon for that, and it was still the part where you think maybe if you just explained it right, it could rewind. He didn't reply the next morning either, not to that message, not to the next two. Around noon I called, straight to voicemail. By the time I sent a third text, I was already spiraling, thinking of every conversation, every missed cue, every time I told myself, he won't mind, he trusts me. I found out later he hadn't even gone to his brother's like I guessed. He'd driven, just driven. Crossed into Indiana, then Kentucky, staying off the main highways, sleeping in the car for 2 nights, eating gas station sandwiches, no music, no distractions. A man like him didn't explode because of one touch. He walked away because of everything that came before it and everything I didn't do to stop it. The first call came just after sunrise. My sister's name lit up the screen. I hadn't told her anything yet, but she already knew. Word spreads fast in our family, especially when something smells like shame. "He left?" she asked, voice low, cautious. "You need to talk to him. He thinks you let it happen." Let it happen. Like I planned it. Like I stood there proud. "I froze," I said quietly, staring into my cold coffee. Travis was drunk. It caught me off guard. She didn't push, just sighed and said she'd try reaching out to him. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and hung up without saying goodbye. Later that afternoon, my phone started buzzing again. One of our friends from work, Jen, texted, "He hit Travis? Like full-on punched him?" I replied with a vague, "It got out of hand." She wrote back, "He said you didn't even stop it. Is that true?" I didn't answer. By the time I checked social media, the whispers had already started in the office grapevine. Some people were calling it assault. Some said Travis made a pass. A few asked if I encouraged it. I didn't tell them what happened. Not really. I said it wasn't as bad as it looked, and he just overreacted. I said it was a misunderstanding. Emotions ran high. I said, "We're figuring it out." But I never said I stopped him, because I didn't pull away. I didn't call Travis out. I didn't even look my husband in the eye when it happened. I just stood there and let the hand stay because part of me was afraid of what it would cost to make a scene. Now I was paying anyway. At some point, I started rehearsing lines in my head. Travis was being inappropriate, but I didn't want to escalate. You know how office politics are. I froze. I didn't mean for it to look that way. Every sentence carefully measured, every phrase aiming not at truth, but damage control, because I wasn't just thinking about my marriage anymore. I was thinking about work, reputation, the next promotion cycle. HR already had questions, so did legal. I told myself I wasn't lying, I was just navigating. But the truth was simpler. I was crafting a version of the story that made me look caught in the middle, not complicit. Only problem was, he knew the difference. And when a man like that stops trusting the truth from your mouth, even silence starts sounding like betrayal. I was making tea when the notification blinked across my screen, an image file from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. Marcus, an old coworker, who had transferred to the Florida office. The message above the photo just said, "Figured you should see this." I clicked without thinking. The bar's lighting was dim but warm, the kind that flatters everyone just enough. Travis was leaning back, drink in hand, his tie undone, 2 buttons open on his shirt like he owned the place. And there I was, beside him, close, relaxed. My left hand rested casually on his forearm as I laughed at something mid-sentence. I didn't look cornered. I didn't look uncomfortable. I looked at ease. I stared at it, jaw tightening. There wasn't a trace of guilt in my face, just that polished, work-friendly version of charm I'd used 100 times in networking rooms. The smile I knew how to wear, but this wasn't a networking room. This was 30 minutes after my husband had walked out. The timestamp confirmed it, 10:17 p.m. I'd sent the "please come home" message at 9:43. I hadn't followed him, hadn't even looked for him. I'd gone back to the bar. That was the part that broke me, not the hand, not the punch, not even the lies I'd let slip from my mouth the next morning. It was the choice. I told myself I was just trying to keep the night from getting worse, that I was being diplomatic, that I didn't want to create more waves, but none of those excuses held weight when framed in that single still image, because pictures don't lie, they freeze truth. And that photo, it caught the one truth I'd been avoiding. I didn't chase the man who defended me. I stood next to the one who disrespected me. Willingly, I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I kept imagining his face when he saw the photo, not angry, not loud, just that look he gave me before walking out, like something permanent had shifted, because it had. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never made him doubt my loyalty. But that photo didn't just plant doubt, it confirmed it. When his message finally came through, it wasn't the flood of emotion I expected. No anger, no sarcasm, just 13 words, cold and surgical. "We'll speak in person, at my terms, and only once." That was the moment I knew the man I married was gone. The silence hadn't been absence. It had been movement, strategic, deliberate. He wasn't licking wounds somewhere in a motel room. He was working, positioning, shutting doors behind me that I hadn't realized were open. I tried calling. Twice, straight to voicemail. The third time it rang once, then cut off. Not blocked, just declined. I left a message anyway. I just want to talk. Please, I don't even care what we say. I just need to see you. I hung up before I broke. The next morning, I logged into our shared banking portal out of habit. The joint travel card, canceled. The emergency savings account, his name removed. 2 utilities in his name already updated. My stomach sank. I checked my phone. No notification, no warning. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't threatened. He just started removing himself. By noon, our insurance account passwords were changed. By evening, I got an email from our property manager. He'd filed an amendment listing one of the condos as exclusive use. I hadn't even known he remembered that place. We barely used it. Then the lawyer called. Not mine. His. She introduced herself calmly, said this wasn't a divorce filing yet, but that Mr. Wallace was requesting clarification on jointly held real estate, specifically with regard to pre-marriage contributions. He's looking for clean boundaries, she said. He prefers clarity over conflict. He'd always been like that. Quiet, thorough, never messy. The man who read every line of a contract twice and never once forgot to lock the back gate. It used to make me feel safe. Now it made me feel surrounded. I stared at my phone at the 3 unsent messages I'd typed and deleted. I didn't know what to say anymore. Apology, explanation, defense. He didn't want any of it. He wanted structure, distance, finality. And somewhere in all that, he still left room for one meeting. Just one, no phone call, no email war, just a single in-person conversation. His terms, his timing, that was the part that terrified me most. Because when a man like that finally speaks, after this much silence, he's not coming to plead. He's coming to close. He chose a law office in a strip mall. Not ours, not his lawyers. Neutral, unfamiliar, beige. It looked like the kind of place where people signed away houses or named guardians for kids they'd already failed. When I arrived, he was already sitting. Button-down shirt, clean-shaven, no wedding ring. He didn't look tired. He looked rested, focused, like every part of him had already accepted something I was still trying to outrun. I sat across from him, folding my hands carefully to keep them from trembling. The receptionist closed the door with a soft click behind me. No lawyers, no mediators, just us. I'm not here to fight, I began. He didn't respond. I just need you to understand what it was like, I continued. The pressure. Travis has this way of getting close, testing limits. I didn't know how to shut him down without... He raised one hand slightly. I stopped mid-sentence. Did you tell him to back off? He asked. Calm, crisp, not accusing, just confirming. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't want to cause a scene, I finally said. His smile was faint, not cruel, not amused, just done. You didn't, he said. I did. The silence between us sat heavier than any argument could have. I tried to look for softness in his eyes, some crack I could press into, something left. But he wasn't angry. That was the worst part. If he had yelled, I could have matched it. If he'd cried, I might have reached him. But this was something else entirely. Like he had already mourned the version of me he believed in. I tried again, gentler this time. It wasn't about him. It was about the room, the deal, the way people were watching. I froze, yes, but you stayed, he said, voice flat. You smiled. You touched him after I left. I felt the flush crawl up my neck, hot and undeniable. That wasn't, don't, he said, not raising his voice, just cutting through. I was scared, I said, softer. Scared of what it would cost if I pushed him away in front of everyone. He nodded slowly. And what did it cost not to? I had no answer. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and placed it on the table. I didn't touch it, just stared at his fingers, steady, measured, already pulling back. That's the outline, he said. Property division. No formal filing yet. You have time to look it over. I didn't cheat, I said quietly. I know, he said. You didn't need to. And with that he stood, buttoned his jacket, walked to the door without looking back. I sat there long after he was gone, staring at that paper, knowing full well that it wasn't the beginning of a negotiation. It was the close of a belief, the last conversation where my version of the story might have mattered, and I hadn't said what needed to be said because I hadn't known what that was until it was too late. He waited until I'd finished speaking, not interrupting, not responding, just watching me like someone listening out of politeness, not interest. Then, slowly, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a plain white envelope. No label, no logo, thick, heavy. He slid it across the table. I didn't open it at first, just looked at him, searching his face for some signal of softness or mercy or second chances. I found none. "What is this?" I asked, fingers barely grazing the edge. "Documentation," he said, matter of fact. "Quitclaim, property transfers, reclaimed titles. It's all pre-reviewed." My stomach tightened. I opened it slowly, heart thudding against my ribs. Inside, a neat packet of forms with my name, his signature, and a list of properties we had once walked through hand in hand. His initials beside every asset, every bank account with my name removed, a condo I hadn't thought about in years, even the old SUV we only kept for winter trips. And beneath all that, tucked between the last sheets, was a black flash drive. I looked up, confused. "What's this?" "Your boss likes cameras," he said calmly. "Security footage. I had someone pull the backup." My breath caught. He leaned forward just slightly. "You know the bar camera points toward the booth, not the front, and the hallway camera runs continuously. No motion sensor." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You don't have to watch it," he said. "I already did." I held the flash drive in my hand like it might burn me. I wanted to lie, say I didn't remember, say it didn't mean what he thought it meant. But I knew what was on it. Him sliding his hand down my back, my face frozen. And then, after my husband walked out, me returning to the bar, laughing, smiling, reaching out to steady Travis as he ordered another drink. I tried to speak. But the words died in my throat. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. "You didn't freeze," he said quietly. "You chose." The room went so still I could hear the soft hum of the fluorescent light above us. He didn't need to yell, didn't need to list out what I'd done or didn't do, because now it wasn't just his word against mine. It was time-stamped, archived, proven, and it didn't matter how much I cried later, how sorry I was, how many reasons I tried to stack like sandbags against the tide, because the tide had already come, and he had already stepped away, dry and deliberate, while I stood there drowning in a truth I had spent too long avoiding. He stood, straightened his jacket, and offered one last sentence. Low, final. "Keep the drive. You'll need to remember what the moment really looked like." And then he left me there with paper, plastic, and the one thing I could never rewrite, footage. I heard about the complaint before I received it. One of the assistants from Travis's office, nervous, eager to stay on the right side of the storm, slipped me a warning. "He's saying you assaulted him," she said, voice hushed like we were in a church. "He's talking lawyers, threatening HR." Of course he was. 2 days later, the letter came, official tone, corporate header, stuffed with exaggerated phrasing, unwarranted violence, excessive force, professional misconduct. They called it an attack, as if I'd lunged across the table like an animal. They used words like unprovoked. My attorney didn't flinch. He printed the security footage, angles from the hallway, from the booth, from the corner of the bar. We sent them all, time-stamped, uncut, clear as glass. Then he added a signed affidavit from the bartender on duty. Travis had been on his third double, making inappropriate comments all night. Not the first time the guy wrote, just the first time someone responded. Then everything went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means they're thinking, the kind that means they're deciding who's disposable. The company didn't issue a formal retraction, no apology, no statement, but they stopped pushing. And then, a week later, a thin envelope arrived at my temporary address, typed label, no return name. Inside was a single note, unsigned. "We've known about him for years. Thank you for being the one to finally say enough. Sorry it had to be you." No flourish, no seal, Just black ink on white paper, folded once, deliberate. I read it 3 times. They had known. They'd let him slide. Smirk. Hover too long at every event. Let women shrink away politely while pretending it wasn't happening. Because the funding came through. Because he played golf with the CFO. Because no one wanted to be the one who broke the illusion until I did. With a single motion, in front of 50 people and 2 cameras. He tried to weaponize policy. I handed them proof. He tried to play the victim. The footage showed his hand before mine ever moved. He had his network, his polished power and quiet threats. But I had one advantage he didn't count on. I had nothing left to protect but my own name, and that made me more dangerous than anyone in the room. He stopped reaching out after that. HR never followed up, and somewhere in the silence that followed, I realized they were never going to fire him, but they were never going to believe him again either. The message came on a Thursday night, right as the sun dipped behind the trees outside my new apartment window. I'd left the blinds open. Let the warm orange spill across the floorboards and wash over the couch, where I now spent most evenings alone, not sad, just still. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, not directly, not even through my sister. That silence had settled into my bones. At first, it stung. Then it just became part of the air I breathed. But that night, my phone buzzed. His name didn't pop up, of course. He hadn't saved me in the new device. It was just a number I still knew by heart. The message read, "I messed up. I miss us. Please, can we talk?" Just like that. No defenses, no rewrites, no justification. It knocked the wind out of me more than I expected. I read it 3 times. Held the phone in my lap for 10 minutes. Imagined how he might look now, surrounded by unfamiliar walls, learning a new grocery route, hanging up shirts in a smaller closet with more space than he probably needed. I thought he might respond. Maybe not that night, but eventually he didn't. I waited. Nothing. I sent no follow-up. I didn't know then that he was in his apartment, barefoot, slow music humming low in the background, opening a folder on his laptop labeled "Years That Mattered." I didn't know that he looked through photos of us on the hiking trip we took in Vermont, of the night we danced barefoot in the kitchen with wine-stained teeth, of my head on his shoulder on the day I got promoted. He didn't rage, didn't cry, just hovered over the folder, one hand resting on the mouse, and clicked delete. No drama, no farewell message, just a clean break. Because by the time I asked for conversation, he had already had every one of them alone in his head, had already asked himself every question, had already faced every silence, had already rehearsed what I might say, and how none of it could undo what had already rooted itself in his memory. He didn't hate me, but he was finished. That's the part no one prepares you for, not being hated, but being irrelevant to the future of someone who once built theirs around you. It came in a plain brown envelope, hand addressed, no return name. I knew the handwriting immediately. There was no ceremony to it, no box, no soft wrapping, no protective bubble, just weight, dense and cold. Something solid inside that made my chest tighten before I even opened it. I sat on the edge of my bed and peeled it open with shaking fingers. The first thing I saw was the watch, his watch, the one I bought him on our 2nd anniversary, the brushed steel one with the navy face he wore to every meeting, every dinner, every milestone, the one that used to rest on his wrist like part of his skin. I'd see it beside the sink in the evenings, glinting under soft light while he washed his hands before making dinner. It had been gone for months now. I thought he left it behind somewhere, but no, he'd kept it, and now he was returning it, to me. I turned it over, no scratches, no message engraved, but beneath it, folded once, was a single note on thick cardstock, his handwriting again, neat, controlled. "I defended your honor, you defended your position." No signature, no anger, just the kind of sentence that plants itself in your throat and stays there. Tucked underneath the note was one more page, a printed PDF folded down the center. I recognized the formatting before I even read the heading. Company Employee Handbook, Section 5.4.2, Workplace Misconduct, Harassment, and Reporting Protocols, the same document I'd rolled my eyes at during mandatory HR training, the same section I once dismissed with a shrug when we talked about Travis after the last conference. "He's harmless," I had said. "It's not worth the drama." I let it slide when it was someone else, when the cost wasn't mine, but when it was me. I froze, and then I covered. And then I watched the man who stood up for me become the one everyone questioned because I never told the truth. Not plainly, not loudly, not when it mattered. The company never punished Travis. He took a leave, reappeared months later in a different region, quietly reassigned. But me? I carried the stain in every meeting room I walked into. People smiled with their mouths, but not their eyes. I started avoiding the office bar. Started feeling the shame I never wore when it could have made a difference. The package didn't ask anything of me, it didn't threaten, didn't beg. It just gave me back the one object he'd worn every day beside me and paired it with the policy I'd chosen to ignore. So I sat there, the metal cool in my hand, staring at the lines I could have used to protect him, but didn't. He hadn't screamed, hadn't posted anything, hadn't burned it all down. He just left me with the final truth, that his outburst had cost him a night. My silence cost me everything else.